Well, it's indeed the season to be jolly, and we're feeling very upbeat here on Network Africa, so we've got a great lineup for you. First up, despite the fact that the Ebola virus disease has struck a devastating blow to the likes of Sierra Leone, doctors in the country are not giving up.
I started here when we were called first. I came here, I put on my PPE here, I was supervised. Up to now, I've never received any formal training.
Then families displaced by the crisis in South Sudan reunite. Also on the program, in nearby Sudan, it's not over for those who lost their limbs to the civil war as Ugandan doctors step up to the challenge. And as usual, we celebrate creativity, and this time it's coming from the streets of Cairo. A very warm welcome to you on this jolly edition of Network Africa with me, Cynthia Are. And of course, compliments of the season. Now, on this edition of the program, we're not going to be bringing you any depressing stories or tales of woe. Instead, we'll be sharing stories of hope, courage, and creativity. First up is the health situation in Sierra Leone. Now, this story you're about to see truly defines the essence of Christmas. It's about dedication and selflessness. Sierra Leone might have been badly hit by the Ebola virus disease, but the only Ebola treatment center in the country remains dedicated in the fight and continues to fight the outbreak. Now, just so you can understand how dedicated the doctors are, they are doing what they can to save lives despite unpaid wages and insufficient formal training on how to use protective equipment.
On the road to Sierra Leone's only Ebola treatment center run by local doctors, the message is clear. Signs reading Ebola is real line the route to Hastings Treatment Center on the outskirts of the capital, Freetown. Unlike the well-oiled facilities set up by international aid agencies, the doctors here say they suffer from lack of training, and most of the center's 260 staff haven't been paid for weeks. The day begins with prayer.
Lord, that as these ones have recovered, you will make them recover too in Jesus' name.
On Sunday, December 21, a Christian clergyman led a sermon for recovering Ebola patients.
The one I used this morning is John 11, where Jesus raised Lazarus from the dead, even though he has been dead for over 3 days.
Mother of two, Emunatu Kamara, listened to the preacher every day when she was on her sickbed fighting for her life. She is now recovering and able to venture outside, but still trapped for the moment in an exclusion zone for Ebola patients.
So I be afraid why be they sick me picking them. They small. They didn't have school, and me they take care. Papa don't carry age. So I be afraid that if they die, but thank God, don't better now.
Leading the treatment of the center's 27 patients on Sunday was a lone junior doctor, 30-year-old Sekou Kanel. He did have support from two more senior doctors. One was away on leave, another was still recovering from the Ebola virus.
Come in. We were using the same door, because all the time he spent here, I was living there. I'll walk, I'll come in, I go in. This Ebola patient is laying here. Sometimes when I come, I'll just say, hey, doctor, good evening, sir. Good morning, sir.
He had been a newly qualified medic with dreams of becoming a surgeon before Ebola struck. But as the outbreak worsened, he threw himself into treating the virus.
We don't have the sophisticated equipment. We don't have all the things that people think that you need to fight Ebola. But even if we don't have, we improvise. We try to do our best.
Now he's known for his long stint inside the exclusion zone in full protective gear for up to 4 hours, several times a day. Most international aid agencies recommend staying in personal protective equipment for no more than 1 hour.
I never went through a training. I never. I started here when we were called first. I came here, I put on my PPE here, I was supervised. Up to now, I've never received any formal training. Never, and I'm not going for no training.
Health workers at Hastings say the government has failed to pay hazard pay or salaries for most staff for at least 2 weeks. They have appealed to Sierra Leone's Ebola response officials and 180 workers have signed a letter of complaint. As yet, there's been no reply.
Even if they don't pay them, these guys are ready to risk their life for their country.
But Canel insists this treatment center is still defiant despite the challenges.
Well, it's Christmas season, and one of the people who need a huge break are those who've been displaced by the conflict in South Sudan. In this next report, you'll see a young family that was broken up by conflict, which has now been reunited in the capital, Juba. When fighting broke out in Bor back in December last year, people fled their homes and made it to safety in different locations.
25-year-old Alice Nyangai Root and her 3 children ran towards the UN compound, but her eldest son was shot and killed as they fled. Alone and separated from her husband and family, Alice settled at the internally displaced people's camp at the Protection of Civilians site. 4 months later, in April this year, the IDP camp was attacked and she fled with her 2 children. She got separated from her second-born child, Mawish Gatluak. The attack caused numerous injuries and loss of lives, and when the UN soldiers were sent in to secure the ID camp, they found Mawish wounded and handed him to the UNICEF officers.
When I discovered that the boy is hurt, I quickly wrapped him off and hold him and ran towards Nepalese clinic near the humanitarian hub. And I was actually so shaken because of the deepness of the wound. And apparently the baby was not crying, so the doctor said that he's in shock. So the baby was given first aid, and immediately they began treatment. And the Nepalese doctor recommended that it's only medical evacuation can save this baby because, first of all, he had lost a lot of blood. We didn't know where to get the blood from. This is an emergency area, so it was a very trying moment.
Fighting between government and rebel forces, which began on December 15 last year, has killed more than 10,000 people in the world's newest state, reopening fault lines among ethnic groups. Nearly 2 million people have been uprooted by the war between supporters of President Salva Kiir and those of his attacked deputy and rival Riek Machar. Most of the internally displaced persons are in remote areas with no humanitarian assistance. Mawish was eventually airlifted to Juba, where he received emergency treatment. He was later discharged and transferred to a care center that caters for recovering children.
Airlifted to the POC in Tompi, in Juba, and there they thought his mom was dead. So we took him in and took care of him. He was malnourished, he was anemic, and he had this big infected wound, and he was not able to move his limb. But with good care, we took care of him and he recovered quite quickly.
Almost 750,000 children have been internally displaced, and more than 320,000 have fled to neighboring countries. Some 400,000 are out of school, and child malnutrition rates have more than doubled according to UNICEF. Aid groups have had difficulty reaching many areas because of the fighting and the lack of tarmac roads in South Sudan, which seceded from Sudan in 2011 after a long civil war.
In collaboration with UNICEF and the other partners, she was discovered, the mother, and after discovering that the child was alive, she really wanted to be with the child. We stayed with the child, dressing the wound, which was healing very fast, but she was so desperate and really wanted to know whether the child was really alive or not. Eventually, when the wound was almost closed, we sent the child back to her in Bor.
Today, Mawish never leaves her mother's side. He follows her wherever she goes. UNICEF is working with parents to identify, trace and reunite unaccompanied and missing children with their families. Since the beginning of the conflict, about 223 separated or missing children have been found.